kombucha, fermented ginger, organic raw tea. Really strong in the ginger in this one. I drink kombucha because it's good for you. It's good for your digestive tract. Puts good bacteria into your system. Those who never had kombucha, that's pretty much what it is. It's a fermented tea. I once had it. This is a name brand, so it's pasteurized. But I've had unpasteurized kombucha at an Amish market a couple of times. Some guy was making it out back in his farm and selling it as was. It's supposed to be really good for you. It's been a long time since I had it. It's not very tasty. It's got a little bit of a strong taste to it because there's natural sort of alcohol in it that builds from the bacteria, but it's okay. It's not bad. So, UEFA Nations League B. So, a bit of a format change, heads up. There are 4 groups, just like the last 2 lower leagues, but less teams. And in this league and in League A, which we'll get to in a later video, there are 12, separated into 4 groups of 3. Only 3 teams. Everyone playing each other twice, home and away, which means that there's less margin for error, and we're getting up there to the highest tiered European sides, which should make predicting this interesting and fun, but not as fun and interesting as seeing what actually happens on the pitch, because looking at these groups, a lot of them, they're really hard to call. Really hard to call. And I would not be surprised if I got less than 2 group winners correct, because this is really when you start to get to the gap in quality. We said before, the Nations League, it's already difficult because in each league, in each group, within each league, teams that are on par with each other are facing off for promotion, relegation. But it especially becomes the case when you get to the upper side of this tournament, leagues A and B, and some really, really enticing matchups here in these groups that I want to get to, and we're going to get answers to in the next few weeks, starting at least. So let's jump right in to Group 1 of UEFA Nations League B, and that is Slovakia, the Czech Republic, and Ukraine. So right off the bat, we get a nice little rivalry between 2 countries that used to be one country, with Czech Republic and Slovakia, and we get to see a 2-legged derby between them to see who gets the bragging rights and who possibly gets promoted or causes the other one to be relegated. And that's going to be one of the more must-watch ties of this specific league, to see how that shapes up. And then you have Ukraine. So which team should I talk about first? I'm going to talk about the Czech Republic first. So the Czech Republic made it to Euro 2016. They usually make European Championship tournaments, but they have not qualified for a World Cup since 2006. And indeed, they only qualified for the World Cup once under the name Czech Republic. Since then, since the breakup into 2 different countries, it's really been Slovakia that's been having more success as far as the World Cup stage is concerned, even though Slovakia have only qualified for 1 World Cup in 2010, where they got to the round of 16. European Championships, the Czech Republic tends to be in every other tournament kind of side. In 2004, we know they had the Golden Generation, one of the most underperforming Golden Generations of any national team, I think, of the modern era. They made it to the semifinals of the Euros. 2008 did not progress past the group stage. 2012, they won their group and got to the quarterfinals. In 2016, they did not advance past the first round. And mind you, in 2016, this was a tournament where 16 out of 24 nations advanced. They were one of the 8 nations that did not go through. as well as Ukraine, I believe. But I'll get to Ukraine in a second. Czech Republic have really dipped off. They've kind of disappeared off the radar in the last decade or so because they're so far removed from that Czech generation between 96 and 2006. And they've kind of become not so much an irrelevant force on international European football as far as World Cup qualifying goes, but they've sort of become something of a third tier type of side. And I can actually see an argument being made that they deserve to be in League C instead of League B, as harsh as that may sound. Looking at the roster of the current Czech national team, really only a few names stand out. I know Michael Kremančík, Vladimir Darida. He's been a part of this team for several years. I believe Petr Cech retired from the national team, former goalkeeper. Some other names on the Czech Republic national team. Theodor Gebrselassie is a defender. I know Suki, he plays the role of a captain. Most of the time, he's also a defender for the Czech Republic. But you look at this Czech generation, you compare it to Czech teams of the past. This is a national program that's really a shadow of its former self. Not so much in the same vein of what Hungary became, but very much, like I said, a shadow of its former self. And I think that combine that with the fact that there's not really much talent coming through into the Czech national team, and you combine with the fact that you look at their results in the last few years, in the friendlies earlier in 2018 as well, they lost to Australia 4-0. They did close out the beginning of the summer with an impressive 1-0 victory over Nigeria. But, other than that, the Czech Republic haven't really done much. They finished, I believe, in third in qualifying for the World Cup in their group. They finished behind Germany and Northern Ireland, who went to the playoffs in Czech Republic's place. And, hold on. For the most part, they've really failed to advance to latter stages of even contemporary World Cup qualifying history. For the most part, the Czech Republic's go-to tournament have been European Championships. There's another player in the Czech Republic. There's another player that I can't remember his name. Václav Kadlec, I believe. Václav Kadlec. Other than that and a few other names I gave, I only know just a handful of players on this Czech team, which really speaks because when I think back on the other Czech team from earlier in the 2000s, I can give you 15, 16 names, and that's no exaggeration. It's hard to predict because it's not like Ukraine or Slovakia are that much of a greater variety. But I'm going to pick the Czech Republic to get relegated. I think they're going to finish bottom of this group and move down to League C. So moving on to Slovakia, there are more mainstay names here that are more, I guess, well-known or well-common. We know that Kuka, we know Marek Hamšík, Martin Skrtel, who I think retired just recently from the national side, Vladimir Weiss, the names go on. And for Slovakia, they have had a little bit more success in recent years than the Czech Republic. Specifically, in Euro 2016, they went to the round of 16 where they were ultimately eliminated by eventual semifinalists Germany and the defending World Cup champions at that time, Germany. Now, unfortunately for Slovakia, as I mentioned in the last UEFA Nations League video, they were the one team that finished as the worst runner-up in the playoffs for European qualifying for the last World Cup. Remember, the 8 runners-up go to a playoffs, but they were the worst runner-up, the 9th team out of 9th, and they missed out on the playoffs, very much so to their chagrin. Whether or not that was just a point of other teams amassing more points to get into finishing in a higher place than them or something else, I'm not sure, but it kind of sucks to be the one runner-up that doesn't even have a second chance to qualify. They haven't been to any major tournament since 2010, the World Cup, save for the European Championship in 2016. But this group presents Slovakia an excellent opportunity to get promoted and to play the best national sides in Europe should they top this group and enter League A for the next season. I would say overall, there's one thing I wanted to add I forgot. Andre Duda, he plays for Hertha Berlin. He comes up against my Bayern team a lot. So I know Andre Duda more than any other player on this Slovakian team. He's a player to look out for. Also Adam Nemec, but he's kind of getting up there in age. He's 32, 33, and I believe he plays in Cyprus for some Cypriot club, if I'm not mistaken. Adam Nemec. But Slovakia, overall, it's hard. Because I think for some time now, they've been in a better position than their neighbors, Czech Republic. But at the same time, I don't know if they are good enough to come through this group and get promoted. I'm going to say they finish in second, which means that the team that I think will be promoted to League A is the Ukraine. Ukraine, they were actually the very worst team. The worst team in Euro 2016. They finished with 0 points and 3 losses. But since then, they showed a lot of improvement with new manager Andriy Shevchenko, a former player, who is now the current coach of the Ukrainian national team. He's 41 years old. Remember, he fired them to a victory over Sweden in Ukraine's opener of the European Championship in 2012 when they were co-hosting along with Poland. But Ukraine were paired into a really difficult qualifying group with Croatia, Iceland, Turkey, and Kosovo and Finland, and they ultimately finished in third behind Croatia and Iceland. As we know, Croatia, a team that went on to reach the World Cup final, and Iceland, who actually finished top of their group. Their results in the last year have been mixed. They got a 2-0 victory over Turkey, but then they lost at home to Croatia, and then they lost to Iceland 2-0, but then they beat Kosovo 2-0. Some key players, I think, are Andrei Yarmolenko and Yevhen Konoplyanka. I watched Ukraine play. I saw bits and pieces of Group I of World Cup qualifying UEFA, and in my opinion, it was the most arduous group in qualifying. So the fact that Ukraine missed out on a playoff spot to Croatia on the final match day when they lost at home, it's a little bit vindicated by the fact that Croatia did go as far as they did in the World Cup. Ukraine didn't lose out to any Sunday League team, so they lost to the eventual World Cup finalist. I would say Ukraine will get promoted. I think they will. Their only tournament experience in World Cups came in 2006, where they reached the quarterfinals. That was the generation of a younger Shevchenko, along with Anatoly Timoshuk, who was the captain of that time. Other players like Rotan and Piatov, from what I remember. But European Championship, only 2 tournaments in 2012, 2016, both of which were group stage exits. So I wonder if they'll qualify for Euro 2020, but in this Nations League group, I think it's doable, and I think they'll top this group. Perhaps not comfortably. It'll be close-knit, but Ukraine to finish top, Slovakia second, staying in League B, and Czech Republic in third to get relegated. So moving on to the next group. We have Russia, Sweden, and Turkey. Another difficult group where anyone can advance. Russia had a great World Cup, both as a host nation, as a national team as well, when they came a penalty shootout away from reaching the semifinals. And they obliterated Saudi Arabia and Egypt and put on very respectable performances against Spain and Croatia as well. This is a side that looks like they're roaring at the moment, and Stanislav Cherchesov, the manager, has had his contract with the Svobodnaya, which is their national team nickname, extended onwards to Euro 20 and Euro 2020 qualifying. So The question for Russia in the immediate aftermath of the World Cup is, can they sustain this good spell of forming? Can they make a deep run into another major tournament? Or will it prove to be the case that having the home crowd and the atmosphere this past summer sort of bore them on to a deep run? Because them getting to the quarterfinals and coming just a shootout away from the semis was very much further than most people, probably Russia themselves, even expected to get. So it's going to be really fascinating to see how Russia plays in an environment, in a competitive setting that is outside of their home ground. Now, I think they're a very good team. They have a lot of talent, a lot of players that should get big money deals to other clubs in the aftermath of the World Cup. Denis Cheryshev was one of the darlings of the tournament as a whole, in my opinion, not just for the Russian national team, but in general. Alan Zagoyev, trying to think of others. Alexander Golovin scored a great free kick in the opener against Australia, against Saudi Arabia, right? So Alexander Golovin's another one to look out for. Mario Fernandez scored the header free kick against Croatia, the equalizer in that match in extra time. Aaron Miranchuk as well. I think he's in his early 20s, so he still has a great contribution to give to this Russian team. So, there's depth. There's actual, real, tangible depth on this Russian side. And prior to 2018 World Cup, they really hadn't done much since Euro 2008. They've sort of been in the wilderness, not doing very well at major international tournaments between 2008 and 2018. But then in 2018, doing what they did on home soil, that was good. It was both good for the fans, but it was good for the team morale and opening a new chapter in Russian footballing national team history. Russia, on paper, are probably the best team in this group. But as we know, in a series of games that are determining a one-off playoff or a promotion relegation, especially in a small group like this, it's not all the time, at least, that the best team really goes through. I do think Russia is better than Sweden. I do think they're better than Turkey, but I don't think they'll get promoted. I think that they'll stay in League B, will finish somewhere in the middle, because I think the team that's going to be promoted to League A is Sweden. Now, Sweden still has manager Jan Andersson, who orchestrated their run to the quarterfinals, topping a World Cup group containing Germany, Mexico, and South Korea. As we know, Sweden preventing the Netherlands and Italy from qualifying for the World Cup. Said on many occasions that Sweden's a side that, individually speaking, they don't have very many stars that are flashy and jump out at you. But as a collective unit, they're very solid. And they were one of the most difficult sides to break down in Russia in this past World Cup. And they went further than they had absolutely any business of going for. Now, Sweden in 2018, this Swedish team gets blown out of the water from the likes of Henrik Larsson and Freddie Ljungberg, the 2002-2006 Swedish World Cup teams. But this side ended up going further than those teams because of their tactically astute awareness and the blueprint under which Jan Andersson had them set up. It wasn't very exciting football, but it was pragmatic and it was effective. And they did what they needed to do against Mexico and South Korea to win the group and to get past Switzerland in the round of 16. And having said that, they do have some quality playmakers like Andres Granqvist, Emil Forsberg. So, the quality is there. It's just that compared to previous Swedish teams, it doesn't really stand out, right? In a similar vein as I mentioned with the Czech Republic national team, now compared to just a decade or so prior. But Sweden had not qualified for the World Cup since 2006. They had 3 consecutive Euro group stage exits in 2008 and in 2012 and 2016. By the way, the Swedish national team in Euros 2012 and Euro 2016 under Eric Hamren was garbage. Absolute garbage. Bottoming out both of those groups. In 2016, they finished bottom of their group without scoring a single goal. The only goal that went in their favor over the course of the 3 games was an own goal that was scored against the Republic of Ireland that went in Sweden's favor. So Sweden were one of the absolute worst sides in the European Championship 2 years ago. So for them to do what they did in qualifying for Russia and what they did in Russia, toppling giants along the way, is absolutely remarkable. And as we know, I mentioned previously, Jan Andersson in the Swedish division, Allsvenskan, he took side Norrköping from relegation to the league title in just a couple of years, or in 3 years, I think, he took them. So Sweden, they look like they sort of have themselves on a reset mode. And they're looking now to the future to see if they can expand on what they did in Russia. Because it looks like it's a project. It's a project that, Jan Andersson is still embarking on, that he's not finished with. He's still with the national team. And like I said, this is a Swedish team. I don't want to offend any Swedish subscribers, but this is a Swedish team that really overachieved in the World Cup. They overachieved because looking at what's on this team, they probably should not have even qualified for the World Cup. And for them to do what they did, getting to the last 8, that's wondrous. So I do think Sweden will be promoted, but that's I'm taking a risk here, guys. I'm taking a gamble. That's under the belief that this project is going to continue. So Sweden will get promoted. Russia will finish in second, which means that the team that's going to get relegated, I think, is Turkey. Turkey's not a bad side. They're not a bad side, but they're in a very competitive group, and somebody has to go, right? Somebody has to get relegated, right? And I think it's going to be Turkey. There is an interesting prospects on this Turkish team, and they certainly did themselves proud by qualifying as the best third-place finisher in Euro 2016 qualifying. And then when they got to Euro 2016, they finished in third in their group, where they just barely missed out on the round of 16 by virtue of not being one of the best third-placed teams. So they qualified as the best third-placed teams and missed out on the second round once they got to the tournament by not being good enough for the third-place side. But granted, they get a pass because that group was difficult. It contained Spain, Croatia, and the Czech Republic, who finished bottom. So Turkey gets a pass for that. Turkey additionally gets a pass for their World Cup group because they were in a World Cup group with, again, Group I, the group of death, with Croatia, Iceland, and the Ukraine, and Kosovo, and Finland. So they get a pass there as well. But unfortunately for Turkey, they made it to Euro 2008, did not make it to Euro 2012, got back in 2016, but they haven't been to the World Cup since 2002. Now, when they were in the World Cup in 2002, we know what they did. they went on quite a run, but they haven't been back since then. And that could just be because qualifying through Europe is very, I guess, unforgiving, and a lot of decent teams can miss out for extended periods of time because of the fact that Europe only gets 13 or 14 spots. But, for certain, if Turkey played in Asia, I think they would qualify almost regularly, if not regularly, just like Japan and South Korea do. But anyway, the only reason they finished bottom of this group is just by virtue of somebody having to finish bottom, and teams that are in better form than them, because Turkey has in this group 2 very recent World Cup quarterfinalists in Russia and Sweden. So that's most unideal for Turkey. But, they'll make things tough, just like everybody in this league is going to make things tough. So Sweden will go through. Russia will stay in League B in 2nd. Turkey will get relegated to League C. So Group 3 with Northern Ireland, Bosnia, Herzegovina, and Austria. Northern Ireland will feel cheated from losing out on a place in the World Cup via the playoffs in a most questionable way when the lone goal that was given to Switzerland came from a dubious penalty across the two-legged playoff, one in very which Northern Ireland fought hard to qualify for because they were in a group with Germany. And they came a two-legged playoff away from getting a spot in Russia, but like I said, the doubtful penalty that was given to Switzerland that proved to be deceitful. Northern Ireland, they've been sort of on the up in recent years. They've made it to the final round of qualifying for first time in I think a while. And they were propelled there by the likes of Josh McGuinness, Gareth McCauley, I believe Stuart Dallas, who scored the bulk of their goals in qualifying. They're under manager Michael O'Neill, and they came just a knife's edge away of actually being in the World Cup this summer. So they will feel hard done. And to be honest, they probably should feel hard done because I remember watching that two-legged playoff and it was a bullshit call. It was a bullshit penalty. But this is a group that is navigable for them and they could find themselves in League A in the next season. But for Northern Ireland, it's difficult to say because they picked up points on the road against a team of equal quality like the Czech Republic, but then they dropped points against Azerbaijan, a team that is, while tricky, not on Northern Ireland's level. So they have a tendency to play down or up according to their opposition. But with Northern Ireland, the issue that I have is this could prove to be a group where just the sheer raw individual talent of Austria, who I'll get to in a moment, will just be too much for a team that doesn't have very many stars, but sort of has to compensate that through the collective effort. But Northern Ireland, it's hard to say where they're going to finish in this group. I don't think they're going to get promoted. I don't think they'll get promoted. But are they going to be relegated? Yeah, I think they are. I think they're going to get relegated. The finish bottom of this group. It's tricky because if there's any group that looks like it could come down to goal difference in League B, it's this one. But I'm going to pick Northern Ireland to come in last, but it's going to be a last with a huge asterisk next to it because, again, somebody has to finish last, right? So, who will finish top of this group and get promoted to League A? Personally, I would love for it to be Bosnia and Herzegovina, but I think it's going to be Austria. I'll get to them in a moment. I said Austria is going to finish top of this group and get promoted. Bosnia in second, Northern Ireland third. Now, I know Austria had a really, really poor Euro 2016, but from what I've seen of them in the last couple of years since then, they've increased their standing quite markedly, let's say. And they did so with closing out World Cup qualifying with a victory over Serbia. They then went on to pick up a good string of friendly results with victories over Uruguay, a World Cup quarterfinalist, as we all know. And then they went on to beat Russia, the host nation. And then they closed out just a pre-World Cup friendly with a victory over Germany, the defending world champions, and the first time Austria had beaten Germany since the 1980s. So they're undefeated in their last 7 or so games, and they've picked up wins against teams that are of much better quality. Like I said, the aforementioned Germany, Uruguay, and Serbia, all three of whom were World Cup participants, whereas Austria missed out. And they got a lot of talent on their team too. David Alaba, Marko Arnautovic, Sabitzer as well. And they qualified for Euro 2016 so comfortably, and then they underwhelmed. But the recovery process since then, as I said, it's been very promising. It's been very promising. And you have to wonder if the team that sort of reemerged on the Western European scene around 2013, 2014, during the whole Euro 2016 qualifying process, maybe that team that went to France 2 summers ago was just an inexperienced side because it was the first time Austria had qualified for any major tournament in quite some time, that maybe they had learned from that. Maybe it's a learning experience. Time will tell. We don't know. And the UEFA Nations League will tell us more of what we need to know about Austria. Because even though what did happen to them in 2016, when many people, myself included, billed them as one of the dark horses, where they majorly disappointed, it still doesn't take away the quality this side has, because we're only 2 years removed from that tournament. They did not qualify for World Cup 2018. They can be forgiven for it, though, because, like I said, World Cups, Europe sends half the amount of teams they do to the Euros nowadays, at least. So maybe this is a team that is, again, in the process of finding their groove that they had a few years ago and that they ultimately lost in France. But lately, they've looked good. They've looked decent, and I think they will top this group. It's really hard. I was between them and Bosnia and Herzegovina, but I'm going to go with Austria. This is going to be one of the groups where sheer raw individual talent will seize the day and bear through, and I think it will be Austria in this case. Which brings me to my next team, the team that will finish second and stay in League B, Bosnia and Herzegovina. They picked up some friendly victories earlier this year against South Korea, as well as, I believe, a draw against the United States and Senegal. And they also picked up a victory against Estonia, but they sustained a narrow 1-0 loss against Mexico earlier in the year as well. Bosnia and Herzegovina, only major tournament experience was 2014. They got to the World Cup. They finished in the group stage. They did not qualify for Euro 2016. I think, actually, they're going to qualify for Euro 2020. As I mentioned in my Euro 2020 European nation prediction video. They have the likes of Miralem Pjanic and Dzeko. I forgot his first name, but his last name is Viska. And he plays in Turkey. I think he plays for Trabzonspor or Galatasaray or some other club. But they've had quite a few number of retirees in the last few years. Spajic, Medujanin, can't pronounce these names. Ibisevic has hung up his boots as well. So they could be in somewhat of a transition phase. I mean, they're a little bit of an unknown variety in this group because we haven't seen them since the 2014 World Cup. So it's kind of hard for me to really talk very much about Bosnia and Herzegovina. They did finish in third place in 2018 World Cup qualifying behind Greece and Belgium, so they missed out on the playoff spot. Whereas in 2014, they actually won their group and qualified directly. I believe, coincidentally enough, that was ahead of Greece as well at the time. I don't really have much else to say about Bosnia because I don't know very much else about Bosnia, at least in the last couple of years, because I haven't really seen them on the main scene. I just know that they've gone through a heavy string of recent retirements, as I mentioned, and a few other key playmakers that are still around, the names that I gave out. And then they have another player, Goran something. Hold on. Okay, I just checked. Goran Zakaric. That's the name. Yeah, he plays locally, actually, all the way in for Partizan Belgrade in Serbia. So he plays, not too far away from home within the Balkan region, the former Yugoslav neighbors. But yeah, other than that, I don't have much else. But I guess I'm sort of playing it safe with Bosnia. I'm not picking them to get relegated, but I'm not picking them to get promoted either. I think they're going to finish second. So it's Austria, Bosnia, Herzegovina, and Northern Ireland. So leads us to our final group. Denmark, Wales, and the Republic of Ireland. And this is the revenge group. Opportunity for revenge for Ireland over Denmark, who defeated them in the playoffs for qualifying for Russia 2018. Revenge for Wales, potentially, who were eliminated by Ireland in the groups when they were paired together prior to the playoffs for Russia 2018. So it's really interesting. So relegation. Who's going to get relegated? Okay. When the draw came out, I thought Wales would get relegated. Because after the inspirational third place finish in Euro 2016, they really dropped the ball. They disappointed in qualifying in the World Cup. And then they just had a run of really lackluster results. But then afterwards, they put in a really strong performance in the China Cup earlier this year against the likes of Uruguay and the Czech Republic and China. I believe they made it to the final of that tournament, and they still have decent playmakers in Gareth Bale, Ben Woodburn, Joe Allen. So I don't think they're going to get relegated, but I came very close to picking them. I'm going to have to go for the team that I think is going to get relegated is Ireland, the Republic of Ireland. Yeah, I do. And the reason why I think the Republic of Ireland will get relegated is because I feel that Martin O'Neill is not a right fit for the team. He's been with the Republic of Ireland national team for a very long time. And to his credit, he did orchestrate their victory over Italy in the final group stage game back in Euro 2016 that saw Ireland get to the round of 16. But they've been kind of stagnating. The Republic of Ireland national team's kind of been stagnating under his tenure in the last few years since then. And they really failed to take the initiative in qualifying for Russia when they were on top of the group for half of the qualifying season. They could have made it to Russia directly. But then they dropped points at 2 consecutive home games, and then it was never the same from there. To their credit, they did get a vital last match day away victory to Wales, which is not an easy venue to play against. I believe they played at Swansea or Cardiff. I'm not sure. I remember watching that game. But I just think Martin O'Neill, it's time for him to leave. There's moments where a manager has only so much to contribute to a team, and then that contribution tends to just plateau. And then they sort of need to move on. I like the guy. He seems nice. I saw him on Fox Sports this summer when he was brought in for pre- and post-match commentating here and there. It was good to hear his voice and his input, but I don't know, man. In the last calendar year, the Republic of Ireland haven't been doing too great. Other than the 2-1 victory friendly over the U.S., they've had a string of really poor results. I believe they lost a few matches to Turkey. They drew with Celtic in a very rare national team versus club team fixture. They lost to France in a friendly, albeit the eventual world champions, of course. But I don't know. I just got a feeling. I don't think the Republic of Ireland have what it takes to come on top against teams of, I guess, that have stars like Denmark does with Christian Eriksen, Miguel Delaney, and they have other key playmakers that can step up when Eriksen goes absent. Big criticism I have of Christian Eriksen is that he's not nearly as consistent for his national team as he is for Tottenham. I stand by it. I said it before, I'll say it again. But regardless, Denmark has the esteemed record of having drawn with both 2018 World Cup finalists. They drew with France in the group stage, the only match in the entire World Cup that France played where they did not win. They held France to a 0-0 draw, and they pushed Croatia, the other World Cup finalist, to penalties. So they have that distinction of having gotten a result against both World Cup finalists of the same tournament. And because of, the individual players that I set on their team, even some of the older guard, like Michael Krohn-Deli, they have something to contribute to the team. I remember Michael Krohn-Deli. He actually scored the winning goal for Denmark over the Netherlands way back in Euro 2012. Then you have Kasper Schmeichel, a clutch goalkeeper as always. So Denmark should be considered the favorites to come through this group and get promoted to League A. They didn't qualify for Euro 2016, but they kind of more than made up for it in World Cup 2018, where they smashed the Republic of Ireland 5-1 in the second leg in the playoffs through a Christian Eriksen hat trick to qualify for Russia, hence why I said there's that whole revenge angle between the Republic of Ireland and Denmark. But I just think Denmark have too much quality in their ranks. There's too much quality in the ranks to not see this group through, and I think they will top it and get promoted. And I also think that Wales will finish in second, staying in League B. Ireland will go down to League C. So, to cap it all off, the 4 teams that will be promoted to League A, I think, are Ukraine, Austria, Denmark, and who else did I say? Sweden. Those 4 will get promoted. The 4 that will be relegated to League C, I think, are Czech Republic, Turkey, Northern Ireland, and the Republic of Ireland. So, yeah. And then the 4 that will stay in League B are Slovakia, Wales, Bosnia, Herzegovina, and Russia. So leave a comment below, like, subscribe. I'll see you tomorrow, God willing. Until then, have a good one. Much love. Peace.